It was a monumental Supreme Court decision aimed at ending segregation in public schools in the U.S. Now organizers are committed to ensuring that Brown versus the Board of Education remains intact. Good evening. This is CTV News for Tuesday, May 13th. I'm Byron Scott.
And I'm Patricia Valone. We'll have that story in a moment. But first, our top story tonight. A truck crashes into the Channel 2 news station in Baltimore this morning, forcing workers to flee and causing police to cordon off the area as they continue searching for the suspect. WMAR reporter Cheryl Connor was not in the building at the time, but co-workers have filled her in on their first-hand accounts. Connor is a Maryland native and former CTV freelance reporter. I spoke with her just before 3 this afternoon for an update.
Our security guard did not allow him into the building. I should note, too, that he was shouting, according to my colleagues who are now witnesses, "I am God." And so she felt threatened enough not to let him in. And so from that point, she called 911. Then, fortunately, there are many windows outside, so she was able to see this guy get into a truck and start to drive toward the building. And so she was able to get away. Now, this happened in our lobby area, and so like any lobby in any building, it wasn't just her desk there. There were people who were walking through as well, who very much could have been in jeopardy. And so this guy literally got in a truck and drove it through our front doors, and the truck is now sitting in our lobby.
Now, the latest report is that the gunman may still be in that building, and 2 schools that were nearby the WMAR station have been on lockdown, as well as much of the York Road area, which has been cordoned off to the public. They are not allowed to go there. Meantime, in 1980, some of the news staff at WCPO in Cincinnati, Ohio, was held hostage by an armed man. The gunman, James Hoskins, later fatally shot himself. WCPO is the flagship station of the EW Scripps Company, which also owns WMAR in Baltimore.
And it's been more than 60 years since the landmark Brown versus the Board of Education decision outlawing segregation in public schools. A coalition of organizations rallied at the Supreme Court today to draw attention to issues facing education today.
60 years, organizing, drying tears.
Under a hot, blaring sun, a coalition of groups, including students, educators, and union leaders, rallied in front of the highest court in the land, the U.S. Supreme Court, where Brown versus the Board of Education was decided 60 years ago this week.
No education, no what?
No education, no life.
The event was part celebration and part call to action. Organizers say decades after the Brown decision, which outlawed segregation in public schools, much work still needs to be done.
But are we where they intended for us to be 60 years later? That's why we're here.
It's 60 years later, and schools are still separate and unequal. Yeah! They are more segregated than ever. Yeah!
They rallied against a host of issues they say are corroding public education in America. In addition to de facto segregation, they cite scores of school closings across the country over the past few years, 41 in Pittsburgh, 26 in Baltimore, and 30 in Philadelphia.
A lot of the high schools are getting shut down, and it's creating a harsh learning environment for a lot of the younger students. With more kids coming in, it's a harder classroom to control, and like the typical class size should be around 20 kids, and now in our schools there's like 40, 50 kids to one teacher.
People also rallied against the privatization of public education, and it was American Federation of Teachers President Randy Weingarten who summarized the day and perhaps set the tone for the future.
Today, my friends, my colleagues, parents, educators, we need to do that together. The community needs to rise up together and say, all deliberate speed means great public neighborhood schools that help all children dream their dreams. That's what today is about, and that's what we must do in the 60th anniversary of Brown versus Board.
Now, organizers plan a host of events this week around the country leading up to the 60th anniversary, the day of that decision. And prosecutors say a woman charged with texting while driving has been fined $500 for an accident that killed a motorcyclist. 21-year-old Elizabeth Myers of Severn has pleaded guilty to negligent driving in the March 2013 crash that killed 30-year-old Jonathan Roberts of Virginia. Authorities say Myers was trying to drive across Route 3 and drove into the path of Roberts' motorcycle. Myers was charged with several offenses, including negligent manslaughter and texting while driving. But a spokesperson for the Anne Arundel County State's Attorney's Office says the policies, or the police rather, investigation that followed the accident led to conflicting evidence which resulted in the plea.
Meantime, last month, the governor signed into law a measure that would crack down on deadly cell phone use. Called Jake's Law, the measure makes a cell phone a misdemeanor punishable by up to 1 year in prison and a $5,000 fine. The law is named for Jake Owen from Baltimore, who was 5 years old when a driver crashed into his family's car in 2011. Jake was killed as a result of the crash. The other driver was reportedly on his cell phone at the time of the accident and never noticed that traffic had stopped. State's Attorney Angela Alsobrooks says drivers need to be aware of the new law.
It gives the police the ability to require that information be provided right away about the phone. The phone can be taken because there's critical information we can get from a cell phone that will tell us whether you were texting and at what time. So we need to be able to get that information through police so that we can use it as evidence in our cases.
And how would this work if you are using your GPS on your smartphone?
You know what? I think that's yet to be seen. I think the spirit of this law is that we want to really outlaw distracted driving. And using GPS and looking down at the phone or playing a game, all of those things fall under distracted driving, and that is the spirit of this law. And you know what? Maybe we'll go forward and see that we need to go back and change the language ever so slightly in the law. The language now speaks to distracted driving and texting, but the point is that we want to outlaw all of the distracted activities that are done through using the phone.
And Jake's Law would take effect on, or will take effect on, October 1st. Prince George's developer is sentenced to 2 years in federal prison and a $50,000 fine, the last of more than a dozen people convicted in a public corruption scheme. Daniel Colton was one of 3 businessmen who pleaded guilty to trying to influence county officials with a series of bribes, including free airline tickets and development deals. Colton is the final defendant to be sentenced in a long-running federal probe that included former County Executive Jack Johnson and his wife, former County Council member Leslie Johnson. And you are watching CTV News. I'm Patricia Vallone.
And I'm Byron Scott. Still